Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of USA Battle Royale. We're just going to start right into it this time. Delaware will be invading Northwest. So, what's going on here is that Pennsylvania has been mocking Delaware a lot, and Delaware has had enough, and they get a bunch of other states to agree to invade Pennsylvania. But they will be the first to start sending their troops in before other states join. And Pennsylvania thinks this is just going to be a short campaign to get rid of Delaware off the map and just annex it fully. But as soon as they start invading into Delaware proper, Delaware gets its friends to join in, and its friends are two of the most powerful states in the country right now, being Ohio, West Virginia, and New York. Shortly following that, New Jersey will join in on the side of Pennsylvania. And so, although Pennsylvania continues to make gains into Delaware, taking most of their important locations, the west of Pennsylvania, which is sparsely populated compared to the east, will quickly be taken by Ohio, West Virginia, and New York, who had both already been in an agreement to pounce on Pennsylvania and basically coax Delaware into invading Pennsylvania so they would both have justification. New Jersey will start an invasion attempt into Long Island, taking the western half of it, which is obviously the more important half. They'll make a few failed invasions to actually take the mainland of New York, after which New York will start invading into northern New Jersey, as well as northern Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is doing pretty well in the western front, but it's not certain how long they'll be able to hold out. Delaware has fully been taken, but has refused to surrender, and its cities are about to be burned down. And when they're trying to burn down Wilmington, New York basically says, if you do that, then we'll burn down Philadelphia. And so Pennsylvania doesn't do it. New Jersey still wants to, but Pennsylvania overrides them. After New Jersey's troops get kicked out of Long Island, they decide to leave the war, which puts a lot of strain on Pennsylvania's troops in Delaware, as a naval landing is made by New York in the eastern part of Delaware to liberate it. And because western Pennsylvania continues to be taken and yet another invasion is made from New York into Pennsylvania, it's clear Pennsylvania will not win this war, and they decide to surrender rather than continue losing land. So let's see what this looks like. And these are the new borders of the Northeast. As you can see, Delaware remains untouched, but also doesn't get any land because New York and Ohio, West Virginia are basically don't actually treat them as a full ally. And they have pretty good relations with each other despite not being in a formal alliance with each other. And they would probably like to form one at some point. Florida will invade north. Yes, the dreaded conflict between the Orange and Green alliances. So there's actually going to be a bit of stuff that happens before this war that impacts the outcome of the war and also explains why the war starts. So it'll all start when South Carolina joins the Orange Alliance, which Georgia takes as a direct threat. And so in response, they get Tennessee to join the Green Alliance, which angers Illinois and Florida. And so they yell back and forth at each other for a while, and eventually the Orange Alliance comes to an agreement that that the Green Alliance needs to come to an end. And so on one fateful day in August, Florida will invade into the southeastern portion of Georgia, sending a bunch of troops in there, like a ridiculous amount. They move right past Georgia's main front line that they had constructed with Florida, and so Georgia's troops have to retreat to the second front line they had made. However, the first front line in Alabama is still secure. Immediately, Tennessee starts fortifying their border with Illinois because they know what could be coming up. And Illinois does try to invade into Tennessee, but they only get a little bit of land because Tennessee is actually doing pretty well at defending themselves. All of a sudden, Georgia also withdraws a few of their troops from the Alabamian front to let them go to their second front line that they had prepared already, which is not really a good war strategy. You generally want to keep your front lines, but Georgia has a pretty good reasoning for this, which is that pummeling into South Carolina, which by this point is weaker than Tennessee. This episode probably takes place a decade or so after the collapse of the Union, maybe even 2 decades, and Tennessee has just been keeping up, and South Carolina has kind of fallen into economic ruin by this point. And so Georgia is able to just destroy South Carolina, and South Carolina's government is going to stubbornly try to stay in the war, but their people will not like that, and their governor will try to stop elections, but he won't be able to. He'll lose an election, and South Carolina will leave the war. So although Florida has made insane gains and is basically invading into all of Georgia, having even cut them off from the coast with the exception of their land that they occupy in South Carolina, and almost started to liberate South Carolina, except now they're out of the war and they are asked nicely to retreat. Florida has taken a lot of Georgia's territory, but now Georgia can focus their full army on Florida, and they have a plan. They know this is the weak spot in Florida's defense because it's the closest to Florida, so they immediately pummel here. And this is important because they start going past Florida's first lines of defense, and Florida decides to withdraw all troops from Georgian territory here to protect their territory, which does pretty well at first. And then a massive breakthrough happens that'll completely change the course of the war, which is Illinois finally manages to break through the Tennessean front lines, and just within a week, Tennessee is on the verge of collapse. It's completely falling. Its front lines are all collapsing, and it just didn't have any lines of defense besides their first one, which is why they held out so long, but also why they're collapsing so suddenly. Georgia will end up deciding that Tennessee isn't worth saving, and so Tennessee will fall to Illinois as Georgia starts getting invaded by troops from Illinois in the north. And so things are not going very well for Georgia, as they need to bring some troops from their southern front, which had been doing pretty well and even been pushing back against Florida, and they have to bring them up to fight against Illinois when they finally do get to the front line, which is right around here, that Georgia had set up for another defensive line that Illinois is going to struggle to break through. South Carolina at this point decides to fully switch sides and join Georgia, which Florida is really angry about, but South Carolinian troops, although not strong, are strong enough to help push Georgia back over here, or to help push Florida back over there, and Florida decides to retreat in a few areas to make their front line easier to defend, which on the map makes it look like they just lost, but they didn't. They retreated. Illinois is continuing to invade, and they try to coerce North Carolina to join them, but North Carolina refuses. And eventually they accidentally invade into Mississippi, thinking that they're just going into more land owned by Georgia. And with this, Mississippi declares war on Illinois, not on Florida, but on Illinois. They then have a diplomatic meeting with Florida in which Florida agrees not to take retribution, as Illinois had already withdrawn their troops from Mississippi after realizing the mistake, but the damage has already been done. As Mississippi starts invading into Tennessee territory, starting to liberate it, once they have enough land to set up a free state of Tennessee, they convince the new government of Tennessee to join the Pink Alliance, even though the new government is basically just a puppet of Mississippi. And now Tennessee is invading into more territory to liberate themselves from Illinois, even invading into the southern tip of what used to be Missouri. Florida's front lines quickly collapse following this event, as Georgian troops no longer need to focus on this border after having pushed Illinois back a sufficient amount that Illinois withdraws fully from Georgia. Florida and Georgia will come to an agreement in which Georgia, who has the lead in the war, will take a little bit of territory from Florida, but not too much. And Illinois comes to an agreement with Mississippi and the new government of Tennessee, in which they get to keep part of Tennessee, but not all of it. So let's see what this looks like. Okay, this is what the borders look like afterwards. This is the state of Tennessee, which is now in the Pink Alliance, and South Carolina is now in the Green Alliance. Washington will have a rebellion. The rebellion is in Alaska, which is trying to rebel to get into sovereignty, and although Washington sends some troops up to the Panhandle, after a while they realize it's just not worth the cost of occupying and retaking Alaska, so they end up deciding to just give it up, and so Alaska regains its independence. Massachusetts will be invading west. So it's becoming abundantly clear at this point that New York is just not going to stop until they've taken over the entire Northeast. In Massachusetts has had enough, and joining them in on this coalition will be Maine, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And this might be the coalition that ends New York. Right away, their most important city, New York, is captured. And from there, it's going to be a slow burn, as New Jersey and Pennsylvania combined are not as powerful as New York, nor are Massachusetts and Maine combined, but all four of them combined are more powerful than New York. Massachusetts starts trying to liberate Rhode Island, which they do, and then they start invading into what used to be Connecticut, whereas Maine starts invading into the northern parts of what used to be Vermont, with maybe a bit of help from Canada. Stable front lines eventually emerge that look something like this, with Pennsylvania struggling to invade into New York. New York then sends troops from Long Island to try and recapture the island, but they're unsuccessful. And it looks like New York will not be able to survive. Vermont begins to completely crumble and fall to Maine, and Massachusetts manages to start fully taking Connecticut. However, in the southern front, things are going a little bit better, as New Jersey makes a blunder that makes them lose Long Island and the rest of New York, and start getting invaded into by New York in the north. While Pennsylvania loses a big battle that could have gotten them a lot of ground, which means they're still going to have these pretty embarrassing front lines that don't even go out of what used to be their state. New Jersey will continue getting invaded into. However, New York is now being threatened by a different way, as the southern coast of Connecticut is invaded by Massachusetts, and Massachusetts and Maine will now formally start their invasion into northern New York, which goes pretty well because not very many people live there. And New York is basically just under the philosophy of let it fall, and it buys them like about 3 or 4 weeks, where all of Massachusetts and Maine's troops are all the way up here. And so they're able to push into, first of all, what used to be the little tail of Connecticut, and second of all, into a large portion of eastern New Jersey, which is the populated part, taking almost all of it. And Pennsylvania has only managed to do like a little bit of invasion into New York during this time. New York's main goal here is to just get at least New Jersey to surrender, because they think the dominoes will start falling from there. And that state is going to be Maryland. So they're going to send troops up to New Jersey, and that's going to help New Jersey out in pushing New York back all the way to here. Maine and Massachusetts continue coming down on northern New York, basically getting all of this taken, and New York has to move their capital from Albany to Buffalo to continue running the war, which means that Buffalo is now the target, and Pennsylvania makes a large incursion all the way to here to try and get Buffalo. However, New York manages to cut them off, and they almost strand a bunch of troops who are forced to evacuate through a very narrow passage over here, and they are killed as they're doing that. And New York basically sells over these prisoners of war to Pennsylvania in exchange for Pennsylvania fully leaving the war, which is a very bad thing for the Allies, but it does mean that New York doesn't kill all those prisoners of war. Maryland, having no way to help out in the war, is forced to leave, and although New York has taken a lot of damage, they're continuing to invade a bit into New Jersey, although their invasion is kind of stalled. And at this point, they formally meet for a peace treaty in which they're willing to give up a lot in exchange for not being completely destroyed as a state. So let's see what things look like. And this is what the borders look like. As you can see, New York took some land from New Jersey, with New Jersey's New Englander allies having basically thrown them under the bus in order to get more land out of New York. And so this is what the borders of the Northeast end up looking like after this. Texas will invade east. The new state to the east of Texas is going to be Mississippi. So Mississippi is going to be being invaded by Texas. Texas offers no justification whatsoever for this war. They don't feel they need it because they feel like they're just going to take Mississippi really easily. And even with Tennessee's troops helping out, Mississippi is not really able to stand up to Texas, which is just a super powerful state. On top of this, the Orange Alliance then starts invading into Tennessee. The Orange Alliance, I mean Illinois, starts invading into Tennessee, demanding the rest of Tennessee be annexed into Illinois, and saying that that was actually part of the peace treaty, was that Illinois was actually supposed to take all of Tennessee. Texas then starts invading up into Tennessee, trying to take it, which gets Illinois and Texas mad at each other, but eventually they agree that Illinois will get Tennessee and Texas will get Mississippi. And eventually Mississippi, realizing there's no other hope, will surrender, but they know they're still going to be fully annexed. This is what that looks like. New York will be invading Northwest. Following New York's disaster in the Northeast, they're turning their sights onto Michigan. New York has become a very militaristic state ever since they started getting land hungry, and they realize they're probably going to face a coalition if they invade any of these 4 states, so instead they decide to focus on Michigan. And they do get help in doing so, with Ohio, West Virginia, and Wisconsin both agreeing to help New York invade Michigan. So New York might not get any of the land out of this in the end. Illinois then offers Michigan to join the Orange Alliance, but Michigan actually turns it down, not because they think they can fight it on their own, but because they think that that won't change anything, and they don't really want to be annexed into Illinois. They'd rather be annexed by the red countries, and so they actually end up surrendering pretty quickly. They really knew they didn't stand a shot. New York takes a little bit of land here. Ohio, West Virginia takes a little bit of land, and Wisconsin takes a little bit of land. Michigan is spared a lot for the fact that they just didn't do much in the war. Afterwards, they do actually end up joining the Orange Alliance anyway, but they didn't want to be in a war with the Orange Alliance. They want the Orange Alliance to prevent them from coming in a war, and since they were already in a war, they didn't think Illinois could actually beat the coalition, even with Michigan's help, so they just decided to do this. Next up, Wyoming will create an alliance with South Dakota. So this is the most important event of the series so far, potentially. But what ends up happening is through their mutual hatred for the Orange Alliance, the Pink Alliance and the Green Alliance will end up merging. I'm going to just turn it into the Green Alliance because Wyoming was the original state that was selected. But it's technically a combined alliance that doesn't officially descend from either of them. But the Green Alliance is now massive, and the Orange Alliance is going to look for new members, and they're going to find one, and that member is going to be Texas. So all of a sudden, the Orange Alliance has gone from significantly weaker to the Green Alliance to probably significantly stronger than the Green Alliance, who now has to watch out because Texas is on their back. Texas will create an alliance with Maryland. So obviously all this entails is Maryland joining the Orange Alliance. Oh, I forgot to color Long Island white back to white. Maryland joins the Orange Alliance, and this is no accident. As polarization is starting to really come in the country, Maryland gets their pals Pennsylvania and New Jersey to join the alliance, and in something that will shock no one, they also get Maine and Massachusetts to join the Orange Alliance, which prompts New York, West Virginia, Ohio, and Wisconsin to join the Green Alliance. And all of a sudden, like 90% of the country is under one of the 2 major alliances. Delaware will end up joining the Green Alliance as well. And yeah, that one move ends up kind of catapulting. Missouri will invade Southeast. So the state to the southeast of Missouri, I would say, is probably Arkansas, given the situation they're in. Missouri was rejected from both the Orange and Green Alliances due to their bitter rivalry with Illinois. The Orange Alliance obviously wouldn't let them in because Illinois is the leader, and the Green Alliance wouldn't let them in because they were afraid that they would spark war with the Orange Alliance, which for now they don't want. So instead, Missouri is doing one last Hail Mary to see if they can maybe have some chance at not falling, and they're invading into Arkansas. Unfortunately for them, Arkansas gets their buddy Kansas to help out, and after this, Missouri has absolutely no chance, as both Arkansas and Kansas start invading into Missouri. Illinois will start an invasion into Missouri, which the Green Alliance is therefore thankful that they didn't let Missouri in. And Missouri stands no chance. They see no reason to surrender. They want to fight till the bitter end to make their enemies suffer, but they know that before long they will fall, and that is exactly what happens. And thus is the division of Missouri. Nebraska will invade East. We once again have another petty war between Nebraska and Iowa. Again, just for land, Iowa has definitely been gaining more strength than Nebraska, but Nebraska still is militarily stronger than Iowa, and by this point they definitely have more people. So Iowa is going to struggle, and what makes the struggle even more is that Illinois will start invading into Iowa until the Green Alliance threatens to intervene on the side of Iowa, and Illinois immediately withdraws. Nebraska will invade a bit more into Iowa before Iowa decides to surrender, because they understand the impacts of the war. And this is what the new borders look like. This will be the final event of this video. Iowa will invade west. Immediately following their surrender to Nebraska, Iowa will use the opportunity of Nebraska basically in the process of withdrawing troops from Iowa. Nebraska being basically in the process of withdrawing troops from more eastern parts of Iowa, and they'll basically chase the troops down. Both the Green and Orange alliances condemn Iowa for doing this because it's kind of against the peace treaty, but they don't really care. And eventually Nebraska orders their troops to stop retreating, but Iowa has already invaded basically back into all of their territory before that happens. And Iowa basically goes to Nebraska, and they agree to a deal where Iowa will withdraw from Nebraskan territory in exchange for getting a decent portion of their old territory back. And this is what that looks like. After which Iowa will officially join the Green Alliance and Nebraska the Orange Alliance, which is kind of risky because they're surrounded by enemies and neutral states and don't have any allies that border them, so they might be in for a pickle whenever the Great War between the Green and Orange Alliances, which is almost inevitable at this point. If that war starts, I don't imagine things going very well for Nebraska. But I'm going to have to end it here, so these are all the states that are left. Comment down below if your state is left and which state you think is going to win. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. But with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.